Hello, my name is Cheyenne, and the claim I will be responding to is the use of recreational marijuana has negative effects on a person's mental and physical health. My opponent had three secondary claims. First, the recreational use of marijuana leads to addiction. Recreational marijuana causes loss of motivation. And lastly, recreational marijuana leads to a lower quality of life. So the evidence that the speaker provides for the first claim that recreational use of marijuana leads to addiction is, at a very young age, they have already become physically and mentally dependent on an amazing array of different forms of marijuana. This observation was made by Dr. David E. Smith, but there is no statistical data based off of this observation. It is solely just made from the small group of children he works with that were not college students. My counterclaim is that there is no evidence of marijuana being physically addictive to the human body versus other illicit drugs such as cocaine, methamphetamine, or heroin. There are no reports of people dying from marijuana overdose due to a quote-unquote physical craving that these other drugs can cause. I have a quote from the National Institute on Drug Abuse stating that from 2001 to 2014, there was a 42% rise in the number of cocaine-involved deaths. And in 2014, there were more than 5,000 cocaine overdose deaths. For the second secondary claim, saying that recreational use of marijuana causes loss of motivation, my opponent's evidence states that in the current study, time spent smoking marijuana accounted for 7% of the variance in participants' GPA, while already accounting for other important factors. The problem with this piece of evidence is that although it proves that marijuana contributes to a smoking student's GPA, it fails to recognize that there is another 93% that has nothing to do with marijuana-related problems. The evidence that I have for my counterclaims come from Dr. Leesta Bentley from Claremont Graduate University that did a study on student stressors, and he states that identified high college student stressors were grades, test anxiety, relationship problems, parental expectations, and financial burdens. So even though marijuana accounts for 7% of a student's GPA, it doesn't make a significant difference versus the other 93% that plays a huge role in a student's life that affects their GPA. For the third secondary claim, my opponent claims that recreational use of marijuana leads to a lower quality of life. The evidence provided was from Morgan Sherburne from the University of Michigan's newspaper stating that daily or near daily use of marijuana, defined as having used 20 or more times in the prior 30 days, was at a 4.9% in 2016. This is among the highest levels seen in more than 30 years. However, when I was reading the same article, the next couple sentences also stated that, but 2016 percentages are still below the peaks in use found in early 1980s when 12-month and 30-day prevalence reached more than 50% and 33% respectively. So even though there was a rise in marijuana use in 2016, that is still not higher than the use of marijuana in the early 1980s. The speaker also failed to provide any evidence on how recreational use of marijuana leads to a lower quality of life. There was only evidence on how marijuana use has risen, but none of the evidence provided backed up the third secondary claim.
Structurally, everything was easy to follow. You recap the evidence that the advocate used on the first point. You challenged the lack of data on the particular quote. I thought that that was pretty effective. You said that there was no evidence of physical addiction, which I think is something that you could probably provide some of your own evidence on. I didn't really hear a source citation on that. I did hear some information about the use of cocaine and how there were deaths related to that. So you did provide some evidence here to suggest that other drugs are certainly more dangerous or problematic. I don't know if that's an attempt to diminish the advocate's significance claim, but it does have a little bit of a comparative effect. So it's not worthless. I'm just not sure how important it is to the main proposition that the advocate's presenting. On the second argument on motivation, you challenged. I think you took a pretty straightforward approach to this. It says only a small amount of the variance in grade is related to the use of marijuana, and then you suggested that there are a whole bunch of other factors that are involved, and you had a nice quote on that particular piece of information about student stressors being related to grades and financial issues and that kind of thing. So that it's likely that those had a bigger impact on people's grades than their consumption of marijuana. And then on the third point, the main issue is whether or not it affects quality of life, and you suggest that there's no evidence that it lowers the quality of life. The only evidence that is presented is that the use seems to be increasing, and you show that use is actually substantially less than it was once upon a time. Even though it has gone up recently, it's still much less than it once was. So in the long run, I guess that that does a pretty good job of answering those particular points that the advocate's presenting there. All right, and the quality of life argument, for instance, there might be some counterclaims that you could present there. You had a little bit more time to develop some of those things, but at the moment what you had was a good press on the argument. All right, thank you.